Hi, everybody. Welcome to our panel today. I am Will. I'm the founder of TriggerPoint. We're a behavioral research and design consultancy. And we're going to talk a little bit about the future. Just piggybacking off the incredible presentation that John gave us today. We're going to talk a little bit about specifically AI and the retail space and what technology is doing to that entire experience. So before we get started, I'm going to quickly ask for our esteemed panelists to introduce themselves, a little bit about their role at their company, and then I'm going to kind of start us off with a story.
All right, my name is Erik Stephansson. I'm the Director of Marketing Research and Global Customer Insights at UPS. I've worked in research for about 15 years. The first 2 of those were actually here at the University of Georgia, working at the Institute for Behavioral Research, if anybody's made their way over there. And most of my background has been in new product development, a lot of innovation work, but at UPS we're obviously thinking a lot more around service lines. So, hand it over to you.
Thank you. Hey, my name is Murali Patnam. I'm the general manager of the grocery business segment with the NCR retail business. I've been with NCR for the last couple of years. Before NCR, I spent several years at Nielsen Buy Business, working in Asia, Middle East, and then more recently in the US. So I have that passion for data, but these days I'm working more on building the technology that enables retailers use their data. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Amanda Sodam. I have about 10 years experience in the market research industry. I started out on the supplier side with Ipsos. I now support Nestle Purina as an e-commerce insights manager, which is basically a blend of shopper insights, brand insights, and syndicated insights. So very exciting.
Hey, I'm going to set the stage quickly, just based upon the conversations we've had today, and try to put a story together for you. And I'm getting the story from an HBR article that was published last year. And so once I go kind of think through the story, or once you guys listen to the story, I'm going to kind of ask a couple of questions of our panelists. And very quickly, I want to introduce you guys and have you stand up and ask questions. You've got 3 great panelists here, and so let's use that time to help you guys. So here it is. The autonomous car dropped Lori at her home and then left for its scheduled service at the dealership. It would be back in time to take her to the airport the next morning. On the way into her house, Lori gathered the drone deliveries from the drop box on her stoop. The familiar voice of Eve, a next-generation smart assistant like Alexa, greeted her in the foyer and gently reminded her of her travel plans for her upcoming conference in LA. Lori hadn't bothered to learn the details since Eve had taken care of finding the best flight, seat, and hotel room that her company's expense policy would allow. As she unpacked her grocery delivery, Lori saw that Eve had adjusted her weekly purchases, omitting perishables and adding travel-sized toiletries and sunblock. Calculating that Lori was running low on detergent, and aware that she'd be coming home with laundry to do, the bot had ordered more but switched to a new, less expensive brand that was getting good customer reviews. And knowing that Lori wouldn't want to cook, it had arranged for her favorite takeout to be delivered upon her return. Thank goodness for Eve, Lori thought to herself. In addition to managing her shopping and travel, the bot tracked her spending and kept her costs down. Each quarter, for example, Eve checked all the telecommunication plans on the market and compared them against Lori's projected data usage. Her current plan gave her the best price for her mostly evening and weekend usage, but with her brother's 40th birthday approaching, Eve had anticipated a lot of data traffic among Lori's friends and family and found a deal from an upstart firm that would save her money. That offer was instantly matched by Lori's current provider, a company that had paid to be featured on Eve and to have the right to meet competitors' prices. Lori relied on Eve for similar help with buying insurance, banking, and investment products. Sometimes she had to instruct her bot about her criteria and the trade-offs she was willing to make, for example, to forego higher returns for a greener investment portfolio. But more recently, Eve had begun figuring out what product attributes she was after, even aesthetic ones, without even having to be told. Lori didn't know how she would ever have coped without Eve. She had come to trust the bot just for advice on complex purchases, but also to make many of her routine decisions and to introduce her to new products and services she didn't even know she wanted. So, if you didn't pick up on this, I didn't hear one brand mentioned one time. And if what John was saying before, if this is the new world where an AI system will anticipate our needs, it'll outline purchases that are going to come into our homes before we even know we need those purchases. And there's such trust in Eve that I may not even have to trust a brand anymore because Eve has got that whole thing handled. That's going to be a very different world than we're into today. Omnichannel, you can make the case, will be replaced by AI platforms. And if this feels far off, it's not. So I was just in a meeting with a smaller hotel chain, and we were working at doing some research with a key client of theirs, or I'm sorry, key customer group. And the CMO of the company said about a quarter of this segment currently just asks, Alexa, where's my nearest hotel, and book it for me. There's no brands, like there's no comparison pricing. It does it for her. So that's a quarter of their customers are now making decisions without ever doing any price comparisons or anything else. It's just being recommended, and they go with the very first recommendation. So my first question to everybody here is like, how are you gonna live in that world? I guess just to be a little more specific is, what are you doing to address this massive change in commerce that could be coming, and it looks like it is coming, particularly with this increased role of automation, and what does that do for your branding?
Sure. So at UPS, honestly, we are already encountering that, right? I mean, we're already dealing with that and trying to navigate those waters. Even if you think about your own consumer experiences, right? You go online to whatever retailer or marketplace you're going to buy through, and you say, hey, I want this, and I want this to show up on this day. They don't ask you, in most instances, who do you want to deliver that package, right? So, somebody threw out the word commodity earlier. That's the battle we're in, right? We are trying to stop the commoditization of our industry. And basically, if you think about it through the lens of your utilities, we don't want to become the dumb pipes, right? So, how do we navigate that? And by the way, there are third-party sites out there where you can go and cross-compare on price, on speed, and whatnot very quickly if you're on the merchant side. So we have to come up with a very compelling value proposition to keep them wanting to engage with us and partner with us long-term. So, as we think about future-proofing our industry, it becomes less about the pipes, right? The actual transit of product A from the warehouse or wherever it is to the home. We need to figure out how are we going to integrate ourselves into their businesses so that when it comes time for them to choose a carrier, we are the must-have solution that both the consignee, which is the consumer, is asking for, but with those solutions on the back end that the business can't live without.
So one of the things I thought about when I read that article is, do we believe this? Believe that this will happen? Would it happen to that extent? And I remembered this quote that we as human beings tend to overestimate the impact of technology in the shorter term and underestimate the impact of it in the longer term. So when you think about how AI will change our lives, I think it's one of those things where it'll change in a big way. So when you think about what NCR does and has been doing for several decades is in serving retailers, restaurants, and banks in serving their consumers. So we are technology providers. And in each of those worlds, especially in the world of retail where I live, one of the things that has happened is that we've entered a state of oversupply. And that's what you were referring to as commoditization is we entered a state of oversupply. So winning depends on demand aggregation rather than being good at supply, right? And people who are good at demand aggregation are the ones that will be winners over the next 10, 15 years or so. And technology just provides the means to do that. So when you think about it, the delivery aggregators like Uber Eats, Grubhub, et cetera, have fundamentally disrupted the restaurant space. And the restaurants that actually prepare the food are not able to integrate into that ecosystem easily. That has been a big area of focus for us with our platform of service that we've been building so that you can easily integrate your systems because all of these, whether it is restaurants or retailers, live in an ecosystem. Same is the case in retail with Instacart and Shipt. With digital sales channels emerging, especially in the grocery space where I'm focused, it's really not, doesn't make business sense for you to run an experiment, set up your own delivery service, than to test it out with some of these emerging ones. And then there is this risk or fear that our customers have that they're getting disintermediated in the process. And how do you enable them by providing them platform with services where they can integrate into multiple providers easily and manage an ecosystem and still be relevant for their consumers with some special experiences they can deliver is where NCR's focus is. So we are listening. We are building capabilities which deliver an open, flexible platform for them to integrate with everyone else. We play in the ecosystem rather than owning everything.
So I think from my angle, working on a CPG brand, this is already happening in large part due to Amazon, which for many CPGs is the largest online retailer that you'll have to deal with. For Purina, we have the benefit of having Chewy, which is actually larger than Amazon. But in a general sense, we are losing our branding space. If you go into physical retail, you're receiving prompts from everywhere you look. You're cross-purchasing. You're being driven by impulse, and that's not happening as much online. Secondarily, it might sound crass, but you could hide a dead body on the second page of search returns. Nobody goes there. So we're paying for space, and we are making business moves to put ourselves in a better position in an algorithm that we're not even 100% sure how it runs. So in large part, that is happening. Then we get Alexa coming in and only making 2 recommendations rather than having all of those search terms or the search results pop up. So it's just whittling away kind of at our presence. And we, as a brand, have to be punchier. We have to communicate in the right ways. Selling pet food is great because we have these emotional heartstrings that we're able to play to in marketing. But again, you worry about it becoming a commoditized item. It is pet food. It is something that's purchased frequently. And you want to make sure that they're still recognizing that you're representing a quality product, even if the decision space is a millisecond rather than a few minutes.
Go ahead and keep the microphone. I want to follow up on that. So what other trends, since you're really selling across many different channels, are you kind of paying attention to in the retail space, especially like the next 5 to 10 years?
So I think it is, one, the digitalization of physical retail. So we see beacons for this in Alibaba in Asia and other places around the world, as well as some of the online grocery delivery platforms. Competing in a more traditional way, but still being digital. I think it gives a lot of brands a lot of hope that, hey, yesterday isn't gone yet, and we don't have to rush into tomorrow quite yet. We're also paying attention to how our retailers are receiving data. We are helping them build out the platforms to harness all of the data that they're receiving now that they are interfacing in a digital way with their consumer. And we're doing that ourselves too. So helping us and them build our brands by the data crumbs that our consumers are leaving behind.
So the digitalization of physical stores is a big trend, right? Especially in the grocery space, the migration to e-commerce purchases hasn't been as rapid as it has happened in some of the other segments. But a couple of big trends that happen on the back end of all of this craziness you described in the front end is how you fulfill that order once it's placed. So there's a huge trend around the fulfillment aspect of it, where the physical stores are not just about experience for the consumers, but also fulfillment centers. There is a trend about micro-fulfillment centers to satisfy the orders that are only growing in volume. And even in the restaurant space, there are dark kitchens that are opening, and that's a huge trend. So if you look at technologies that are enabling it, a couple of things, right? Robotics. Robotics has a huge role to play in this future world, because when you're picking orders, humans are never going to be as efficient as robots will be, and that's going to be a huge area. And in the digitalization of the store, when consumers are engaging with you, IoT devices as well as computer vision is a huge area of technology that is driving trend. Amazon Go, when it came out, made a lot of news, and that's what all grocers talk about. But again, even though it's not going to be so relevant in the short term for a large number of retailers, the big question is some of the technologies that are at play, like computer vision and robotics, are very, very relevant for everybody at this point.
Great. So I'd say there's really two things that we're paying attention to. The first is what we call time in transit. It's a kind of a catchphrase we use a lot around UPS. Right now, again, consumers are being programmed that expectation is to receive a package in X number of days, and that it will show up at a certain time, right? The catch is that we keep pushing that further and further, right? And if you think about that sloped curve that we saw earlier, like at some point, it's just not feasible anymore. It's not going to get here in 20 minutes, right? Unless maybe there's a new alternative network that pops up. Like, what if Uber or Lyft starts delivering? There's a phenomenon right now called buy online, pick up in store, right? Yeah, it's huge. It's taking a lot of business away from us right now. Right, it's really popular. And it's great, right? Because there's this phenomenon that we call the e-commerce crunch, right? I buy online because it's convenient. They have a great selection. Theoretically, I get a better price. But what people don't talk about is the delivery experience, right? So we're all busy individuals. A package car is going to show up at your house at 3 o'clock when you're not there. It's going to sit on your doorstep for a couple hours. Hopefully it's not raining. Hopefully nobody comes and picks it up for you, right? So, those are the things that we recognize. And the buy online, pick up in store is a phenomenon that is changing that. Well, what if Uber decides they want to pick up those packages and somebody will, do that as their side hustle? The second thing that we're really paying attention to is kind of a spin on time in transit, and this is more for our B2B relationships, and it's what we're calling now time in transaction. Especially with digital natives becoming more and more engaged in the workforce, they've been brought up on platforms and technologies that are very easy to use. They're very fast. B2B platforms historically have not been that way. So as we look to the future in trying to maintain and win over business, making sure that our platforms are very easy to use, very simple, very much like that Burke survey that we just saw, just trying to streamline those processes.
Last question before I kind of open up to the audience here. Given this massive amount of change and the new technology, it's even beyond just the artificial intelligence, how is this going to impact, in your world, the types of research tools you're looking for, as well as the types of people you're going to need to hire? Just go around that was the same side.
Sure. So I think it's not necessarily that we need to change for our situation. It's not necessarily that we need to change the type of research that we're doing. It's more that we have to change who we're talking to and the questions we're asking. Again, it's in my mind not going to be about, hey, when do you want this package to show up? It's going to be now, right? We have this instant gratification that we're just feeding into now as a society. What I need to worry about is as these new businesses are ramping up and they're building out their systems, because, by the way, there's somebody out there that is going to take all of their business, because demand generation is the most important thing to them, and say, hey, shipping's kind of a pain. You aren't an expert. We can be that expert for you. Just let us worry about it. And then, again, disintermediating UPS from that equation. So what we need to understand is as these new businesses are forming, what are they worried about? What are the things that matter to them at that juncture? And then, by the way, we're best in class as it relates to your logistics. So let us help you with that too while we take care of all these other issues on your behalf.
So during my past life, when I wear the hat of what we were doing back in Nielsen days, the shift was very definite from understanding what happened to why it happened, that understanding the drivers for particular behaviors, particular purchasing patterns. And while everybody talked about big data over the last decade, it's also big noise, because many a times insights exist at the intersection of different types of data, and getting access to that is a huge issue. So when I wear my NCR hat today and work with retailers, I understand why that is the case. And our focus is on building software that is edge point agnostic, works in a wide variety of interaction points for the consumers, and also makes it quite easy on the back end, not only for internal processes that the retailer has to share data with each other and drive insights from it, but also share data with partners who are helping them to drive better business results. This translates into outcomes in how you manage promotions and loyalty, and connect that with some of the technology trends we talked about. Proximity-based promotions is a huge thing, right? When you are in the store, many a times, even if you have an insight from the data, it's too late to take action. And the world changes so much where by the time you try to implement a program based on the insight that you have, it's already changed. So how do you get real-time data and real-time analysis to influence the customer at the point of transaction, at the point of interaction is a huge thing. So making it much more real-time is a huge emphasis for us. Yeah.
For us, it's largely about not adopting technology for technology's sake, adopting technology to meet the consumer where they are and make sure that our testing is keeping up with the technologies that they're using day to day. So we are partnering with a lot of different companies, Remesh, Zappy, Nailbiter, to make sure that we are kind of in the consumer's pocket at all times when they want to tell us about their pet food journey or purchasing cat litter or whatever that might be. The other thing is that we're integrating capabilities into our own staff, and so we're using UX workshops and empathy workshops to make sure that all of that is ingrained. The second part of that question was, how does that change how we're looking for employees? And I would say it doesn't change who we're employing from an insights aspect. I think that those of us in this room are very much armed to deal with the way that data is evolving. It is actually the other capabilities in the company that may need to change and shift a little bit. Products like Power BI and the ability to access data on an ongoing basis. We need salespeople, we need finance people who don't only understand their specific area of expertise, but are bringing the consumer and the understanding of the consumer back into that, because it's not just marketing's job to make sure that we're paying attention to what the consumer needs. It's all of our jobs. And that can get easily lost in a world that is being driven by algorithms. Lastly, I would say development of things like the data lake and developing taxonomies that can be used by the whole organization to look for trends that haven't even emerged yet. So we're addressing needs in the innovation pipeline before they even emerge so that we're there when the consumer needs us. And that's the common thread. As a CPG, we need to be there for our consumer when she needs us.
Do we have time for a minute? No. Okay. Well, we have an incredible panel up here. Who would like to pose a question? Be specific, if you can, on who you'd like to ask the question.
Very interesting thoughts that you had. So I just want to propose something back to you from the example you gave at the beginning, right? This Eve or EB, she makes decisions for this person and you're just kind of subject to that, and that makes brands obsolete. But I wonder if you would imagine the opposite could happen, right? So instead of having algorithms that companies have to try to understand the behavior of multiple consumers, you have a single machine that works as an algorithm to understand a single consumer or household, right? There should be some type of feedback mechanism there. And I can imagine that if an algorithm perfectly understands a household, they understand what that person likes, it might be even more important for brands to know exactly what type of consumers they appeal to, because that way they can be targeted by these algorithms. Just a thought. Have you considered this?
For me personally?
Any of you? I mean, you brought it up, so I'm very intrigued.
You guys live in this world every day. I'm just a psychologist.
So I'm just trying to understand the question a little better. So when you talked about a box inside a house, you're saying it's restricted to that household to understand the buying patterns and behaviors and preferences?
I'm saying that, say you have an Alexa at some point should have some feedback mechanism to understand that it's making the right decisions for you, right? Say it books a hotel for you and it's a really horrible hotel, right? You have to give some ability of feedback, otherwise you're not going to continue to use Evie or Alexa to book your stuff. And so if that's true, it perfectly understands who you are as a consumer at some point. And being able to target that way through an algorithm could be very powerful.
So more or less, this already exists within Amazon to some extent. The drawback there is that the creators of the products don't have transparency to all of or even some of that data. The feedback loop stops at that retailer. And I don't foresee any CPG company successfully operating one of these AI assistants. It's just not within our skill set. If it is Amazon, I doubt they share their data. If it's not, it will be highly monetized and probably restricted. So that would be my fear on the feedback loop. So for us in CPG, it will be hard to access that data and actually make better products to better fit that household. But yes, we would expect that there would be a feedback loop there.
So just to add on to that, some of those feedback loops exist because even though it's not in that specific point of transaction, if it's a horrible experience for a large number of people, it automatically gets deprioritized eventually, right? That's one. And secondly, you had a great point when you said there is restrictions in terms of how those data sets can connect. And I think they'll open up over time, but right now, there's a real challenge other than the consumer telling this and don't book it next time because I've had a horrible experience.
Yeah, I guess my only add from like a logistics perspective is that businesses very much are predicting your purchasing behavior already just based on past purchases, and they're already, because of this 2-day footprint and whatnot, navigating those products to be within that area just based on prediction of your future behavior. I mean, people will receive packages by accident because they think you're gonna order it, right? So just keep your eyes out for that.
And with that, we will call it a panel. Thank you very much for that.